I'm thinking about form because one of the motivating factors for me in building this temple was that I was really feeling it after a couple of years of COVID, that we were doing this practice entirely sitting still, right? I tried to come up with something that made sense in that context. And as I've told some people, in that little blue corner where I used to sit, just to my left, there was a huge pile of my daughter's art supplies. And just to the right of where I was sitting, there was a hamster cage. So there wasn't the freedom to get up and do the things that I really strongly associate with the practice, like doing prostrations and all of that. So I started to feel this longing to get back to a practice that is more physical, that involves more movement. And what I hoped, and what I still hope, is that by doing that in this space, even on days like tonight when it's just me, that we collectively can start to feel more like it's that kind of practice and not just a practice of sitting in one corner of one room. But if everyone were here, if everyone were here in person, and if we were meeting regularly, there's a kind of natural osmosis by which people would absorb form, right? It would start by people watching me, and they'd be in the room with me, and they would notice that when I stand this way, and when I walk this way. And not everyone is observant about those things, but some people would be, and they would start to imitate that. And then that would kind of carry on, and when new people showed up, they would have that. There's, in Japanese they call it kinchokan, right? It's kind of a nervousness of, oh, I know that there's something I'm supposed to do here, but I'm not sure what it is. And it keeps you very awake. You really start paying attention to what other people are doing and how they're doing what they're doing. And then again, you try to imitate it just because you're trying to fit in. So there's a lot of explanation that doesn't necessarily have to happen in that setting. There's another side of that, of course, which is that in that setting where we're all together and we're all forming that shape of the practice collectively and collaboratively, it's easier to understand the purpose of the forms. Because when one person isn't doing it at all, when one person has no regard for that kind of formal ritual aspect, you really feel it, right? So we have a natural tendency to try to figure out what this, or how to hold this kind of collective sense. But when we're all on Zoom, when we're all in our respective living rooms and bedrooms and kitchens, and it's just me here, or maybe only a couple other people are here, I think it's natural not only to not know what to do, but also to feel like, maybe that's not what we're doing. Maybe the form part of it is not part of this. So I wanted to acknowledge that. First of all, I think it's natural and it's human, and I think it's an almost inevitable extension of where we've found ourselves in this hybrid space. But as someone who I think in many ways came to Zen through the physicality of it in monastic practice, who really found for himself that was where the depth often was, I want to be sure that we're exploring ways of sharing that together, even when we can't be in the same space. So I thought what I would do tonight, and it only takes a few minutes, is I want to offer up what I consider to be the fundamentals of form in Zen. And by that, I don't mean specifically how to do this or how to do that. There are a lot of those things, and you can spend months in a monastery learning them and still getting them wrong, though I'm happy to talk about any of them. But rather, I think that there are common elements that together kind of define how form works in Zen practice. And if we know what those things are, then we can come here, or we can go to any Zen center or Zen temple in the world and have a pretty strong, solid sense of how to follow along because we know the basics. And then B, we can start to explore what it means to bring form into our lives outside of a Tuesday night when we're all practicing together. So, because things often come in threes, I guess this is going to come in threes. I have three basic principles for form. And these apply to anything that you do in a monastery, anything that you do in a temple, anything that counts as formal, ritualized Zen practice. And the first one is that Zazen is the measure of posture, and that posture is always, always, always important. Posture is non-negotiable. So there's no situation in a Zen practice setting where someone sits like this. Ever. There's no situation in which someone bends over unless it's to pick something back up and come back up. Ever. There's never a situation in which someone kind of leans like this and put one's hand on the ground, or for that matter, even leans backward against anything. In both of the monasteries where I trained, in one of them there were no chairs, and in the other one there was a chair at the end of a hallway, and no one knew why it was there, because no one sat in chairs. There was no circumstance in which you would place your back against an object like I'm doing right now. So through Zazen, through the practice of Zazen, we're learning something about what posture is, right? We understand what it is to be straight, and we know that it's an often an exaggerated sense of straightness, right? Your chest is out, your shoulders are back, right? Your head is not like this, it's like this. And if we know this, if we kind of internalize this and say, okay, this is never going to change no matter what I do, then when we're bowing, we understand, for example, that we aren't going to put our elbows in front of us because that's curling our shoulders forward. And so that can't be a bow. It's not an option. The only way that we can bow is to somehow maintain the straightness of our backs. And it's going to involve this kind of pulling back. When we eat and we pick up a bowl, it's the same. The bowl will not be down here so that we can go to the food. The bowl will not be here so we're all crumpled up. Step one is that we establish the body, and the body is always just doing what we do in Zazen. How do you eat in Zazen? The answer is the way that you eat in a Zen monastery, which looks like this, right? Staying straight. When we read sutras together, and I try to remind people of this when they come sit here because I want people to see it, there's a tendency, I think a natural tendency, we want to open up the book and then we want to put it down on the ground because it's big type, it's great, and that way we don't have to worry about it. But then we're doing this. If we bring Zazen into this, if we say, how do I chant and maintain the posture of Zazen, then we know the answer, which is that we're going to pick it up and we're going to hold it in front of us like so, right? So this applies just across the board in any circumstance where you're trying to bring the Zen practice element into an activity. One of the first things you can ask yourself is, what does it look like with the posture of Zazen? Because that's probably the answer to the question. The whole thing. So that's number one. Number two is maybe slightly more subtle, but also really important, which is that you do things, the word that gets thrown around a lot is wholeheartedly, but what that really means is you do something with your whole body. So when you hold the sutra book, even if it's a really nice, compact, small sutra book, unlike this, you don't hold it with one hand, because then you're not doing things with the whole body. You hold it with two, right? When I'm hitting a bell, I'm hitting it because it's a relatively small bell. It's here. I'm only striking it with one hand, but the other hand is up because there's never a hand that's not doing anything. There's never a hand that isn't participating. So when I ring the bell, I ring it like that. And if it were a bigger bell, like you might find in a monastery, then I might actually be hitting it baseball style, like this, with two hands. I didn't bring bowls for eating, but when we hold bowls to eat, we hold like this. When we hold, and then we're eating with chopsticks. When we go to pick up the chopsticks, first we actually pick them up, even though they're only two and they weigh an ounce. We pick them up with two hands, and then we move them to the right hand, and then we use the right hand and the left hand to pick up the bowl, and then we eat. And the left hand is participating and the right hand is participating. All of this is to say that in any circumstance, in any situation, if there's an opportunity to either use two hands together or to somehow bring the non-active hand into participation, often with a bow, that's the correct way to do it. And if you go to San Francisco, if you go to Nebraska, if you go to Japan, if you go to Germany, and you stumble upon a Zen center and you're thinking, oh, but I don't know how they do it there, you kind of do, because this is one of your guideposts, right? In everything that you do, you're going to use two hands. You're going to use your whole body to do simple tasks that, practically speaking, don't require that kind of total effort or that kind of total commitment, but you'll do it anyway. And then the third thing, and I thought about this a lot, and I really do think it comes down to these three things. The third thing is that because you're always practicing in community, you're always synchronizing with someone, right? There's nothing that you're doing at your own pace. And perhaps the simplest illustration of that is that when we do ceremonies here on a Tuesday night and we chant and we often do the vows, for example, I'm here in the middle, the camera's on me, and I'm doing full prostrations. And you all are at home and you're seated probably. You might be doing prostrations with me, but either way, you have your hands together. To synchronize means not just that you bow and that I bow, but that you're bowing, because I'm the officiant, at the same pace that I am. You're watching me, and you're going down so that your forehead is touching the ground when my forehead touches the ground. And you're coming back up as I come back up. When we hold retreat and you're sitting in Zazen and someone comes to the seat next to you and they bow to their cushion, you put your hands up in a bow, right? You're not doing the same thing at the same time, but you're acknowledging in all these little subtle ways that you're practicing with the person who's in your visual range, right? You're mirroring them, or you're copying them, you're timing your movements with them, something. But you're not just doing nothing, and you're definitely not doing the same thing, but on a different schedule, right? So when you see this done by people who are doing it all the time, you see this, what we would describe as the pinball machine, right? Where you're hitting the pinball machine and the little flippers are moving at the same time. If you were to watch ceremonies from above, it's a lot of these two flippers turning, bowing to each other, and these two turning and bowing to each other, and these two turning, and now the ball is moving this way toward the altar, and then it's coming back, but always at the same pace, right? There are a lot of variations in different temples, different centers, different monasteries, and there are ways that uh, you can spend a long time practicing this to get it just right, right? Or to know all the little details behind this. But as a basic idea, if you were invited into a space and someone said, for example, oh, you're going to be the person who holds the incense, right? Which means you're going to march up with the officiant, you're going to hand the incense. Well, there's probably someone on the other side of the officiant who's also moving up. And you know, even if you've never been there before, even if you've never done this role before, you know already that you're going to stand up really, really straight while you do it. You know that you're going to hold that stick of incense with two hands, even though it weighs nothing. And you know that you're going to walk in tandem with the person opposite you, right? And then you're going to get to the altar and they're going to turn inward to bow. And so you're going to turn inward to bow. And then you're going to bow at the same time, right? All of this can be taught, all of this can be just kind of absorbed. But if you know these three basic principles about posture, about using the whole body, and about synchronizing with the people around you, then you know how form works and you know what it is that you're trying to do. That's it. That's the whole thing. I was thinking there's something in parentheses after this, which I've joked about in the past, which is that, when in doubt, bowing is not bad. If you're trying to figure out what to do, if you're unsure, but it feels like something happens right now, a bow is probably not a mistake, even if it isn't the same thing that would normally be done in that situation. But basically, it comes down to these three. In terms of how we practice here on Zoom, I would like to think, I hope that for all of you at home, if you are thinking about these three things, if you start to kind of internalize these three things, that you will feel a little bit more connected to the other people on the screen and to me in this practice that we're doing, that you'll feel it with your body in a slightly different way, a little bit less like you're watching a show and a little bit more like you are the show. And then when you're out and you're taking a walk, when you're standing in line at the bank, whatever that is, and you're thinking about how practice extends into the world, I hope that you'll think about these same three things, right? The posture of Zazen, I always say, just stand up a little bit straighter. If you're not sure what to do in any given moment, if you're not sure how to be present in any given moment, you can stand up a little bit straighter because you know what this posture is, and you know that this is one way to be present. You can try doing things with your whole body that you otherwise wouldn't. And what you'll find is that you're less distracted, you're more present, right? You're more committed to this thing that we so easily think of as being unimportant or think of as being an intermediate moment between moments that matter. And then the creative one, the really interesting one, is the one about synchronizing. What does it mean to synchronize with other people? Well, it probably doesn't mean that you're going to walk in lockstep with someone down the street, though sometimes that happens. It probably doesn't mean that you're going to turn and face someone at exactly the moment that they face you, at the coffee shop. But I think it can be held as a kind of question in the moment. What does it mean to hold myself with the understanding that I'm doing this in relationship to that person or to these people, wherever I am? What does it mean to be here and to be constantly aware of the other people here and what they're doing. If we follow that, I think the results are a little less predictable than they are with the other two, but they still point toward this presence, toward this awareness, toward this aliveness, and toward this understanding that we're giving value to what we're doing and to who we're doing it with in a way that otherwise might just kind of not happen. Because why bother? That's my little speech on form. I hope it's useful. I hope it's an easy set to remember. And with that, I just want to open it up. And if there are questions about form, about it conceptually or practically, please bring them on. And like I said, if there's any specific thing that you'd like me to demonstrate, I'm happy to demonstrate it. There is no right way to do most things, but because we have these basic principles, there being no right way doesn't mean that there's no wrong way. I'll show you the way that I know, and we can do it that way.